It was the day of the big interview. The one opportunity that could change everything for 21-year-old Mariah Linton. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, rehearsing her answers, ironing her best clothes, and even practicing a perfect handshake in front of her bedroom mirror. This wasn't just any interview, this was with the legendary Billionaire CEO, Ethan Ward. Ethan was known for making life-altering decisions in a split second. His company, Ward Enterprises, was the most successful tech firm in the nation, and landing a job here would guarantee success for life. Mariah had grown up in a small town. Her family struggled with money, and she had always dreamed of making it big. But dreams cost more than just hope, they demanded sacrifices. Her worn-out shoes were proof of that. And this interview? It was the one chance she could seize to escape the suffocating weight of poverty. But things didn't go as planned. Mariah was running late. Her alarm hadn't gone off, and by the time she realized, she had only 30 minutes to make it to the interview. She rushed out of her apartment, her heart pounding. The bus she needed to catch had just left, and there was no time to get a cab. She began walking, but the city traffic was brutal, and every second seemed to stretch into eternity. Then it happened. As she rounded the corner of a busy street, she saw it, the huge puddle, formed by a burst water main, blocking her way. She cursed under her breath, taking a step back to look for a way around it. But there was no way. The puddle was wide, deep, and there were people everywhere. She couldn't afford to wait. She had to keep moving. Without thinking, Mariah took a deep breath and sprinted right through the puddle, hoping to avoid splashing too much water on herself. But her foot caught on the edge, and she tripped. The splash was deafening. Cold, dirty water shot up, completely drenching her clothes and shoes. She scrambled to her feet, but it was too late. Her entire outfit was now caked in thick, brown mud. Her heart sank. She couldn't believe it. She had no time to go back and change. No time to fix this. With only a few minutes left, she had no choice. She had to go on, dirty, drenched, and defeated. Mariah arrived at the headquarters of Ward Enterprises, trying her best to maintain her composure. But as soon as she stepped into the grand lobby, her confidence shattered. All eyes were on her. The polished marble floors, the sleek black and white furniture, everything screamed wealth and success. But here she was, covered in mud, standing out like a sore thumb. She saw the receptionist, a woman in a sharp suit, look at her with a raised eyebrow. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her tone polite but clearly surprised. Mariah could feel the judgment in her eyes. She wanted to leave right then and there, to disappear, to forget about the whole thing. But she couldn't. Mariah took a deep breath and forced herself to stand tall. "I'm here for the interview with Mr. Ethan Ward," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. The receptionist blinked, clearly unsure whether to believe her. But before she could say anything else, a door opened across the room, and a man stepped out. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, and had an aura of authority that instantly commanded attention. Mariah's breath caught in her throat. This was Ethan Ward. The CEO she had heard so much about. He didn't look surprised or judgmental. He simply looked at her for a moment, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. Mariah couldn't help but feel a flush of embarrassment wash over her. She had tried to make a good impression. She had worked hard to get here. But now, she felt like nothing. Ethan stepped forward. "Miss Linton, is it?" he asked, his voice calm and composed. "Yes, sir," Mariah answered, her words coming out a little shaky. Ethan smiled, but it wasn't a reassuring smile. It was the kind of smile that told you he knew exactly what you were thinking, exactly what you were going through. "You're a little muddy," he remarked, raising an eyebrow. The comment hung in the air, sharp and cutting, and for a second, Mariah's entire world seemed to slow down. But instead of dismissing her, as she feared he might, Ethan looked her dead in the eye. And yet, you're here. That's the first thing I admire about you, he said, surprising her. Come with me. With that, he turned and walked toward a set of sleek glass doors that led to the executive floor. Mariah hesitated for a moment, confused and uncertain, but she followed him, her mind racing. What was he thinking? Why wasn't he telling her to leave? She couldn't understand. But this was the chance she had been waiting for. She couldn't back down now. As she followed Ethan down the hall, Mariah tried to wipe off the mud from her clothes, but it was no use. Her shoes were caked in it, and her hair, which had once been perfectly styled, was now a mess. She felt like a fool. But Ethan didn't seem to care. He led her to a glass-walled conference room where a few other candidates were already sitting. They all turned their heads to look at her. They were all impeccably dressed, tailored suits, neat hair, polished shoes. And there she was, covered in mud, trying to blend in. Ethan stood in front of the room and addressed everyone, but Mariah couldn't focus on what he was saying. Her thoughts were swirling. Why had he chosen her? Was this some sort of test? Could she really pull this off? Then, he did something that sent shockwaves through the room. He pointed at Mariah. You, he said, his voice sharp and clear. You've already passed the first test. You have something these others don't. You didn't give up. You didn't let the situation defeat you. You showed up, and that's more than half of what I need in my company. The room fell silent. Mariah's heart raced. Was this real? Was she really about to be hired, covered in mud, no less? But then, as if sensing her hesitation, Ethan added, but now the real test begins. Let's see if you have the guts to prove yourself. The room fell into an eerie silence. What did he mean by that? Marry a few moments of suspense, and then the true test was coming. The game was just beginning. Mariah's heart was racing as she stood there, still covered in mud, trying to process what had just happened. Ethan Ward's words echoed in her mind, you have something these others don't. You didn't give up. You didn't let the situation defeat you. You showed up. Her mind was spinning. Was she really being praised for showing up covered in mud? She had thought she'd ruined her chance, and yet, here she was, being singled out by the CEO himself. Ethan didn't let the silence linger for long. He gestured for everyone to sit. Now, I'm not here to waste time, he continued, his voice sharp and focused. I want to see who's really ready to step up. You all think you're ready for this job. Let's put that to the test. Mariah nervously took a seat at the long conference table, making sure not to make eye contact with the other candidates. They all seemed so perfect, so polished. It felt like she didn't belong here, like she was an imposter in a room full of professionals. But Ethan's words kept her grounded. She hadn't been sent here to fail. She had been sent here to prove herself. Ethan paused for a moment, allowing the tension to build in the room. Then, without any warning, he turned to the whiteboard at the front of the room and wrote a single word in bold letters, strategy. The candidates shifted in their seats, eyes narrowing, as they tried to figure out what was coming. Mariah didn't know what to expect either, but she knew she had to be prepared for anything. Let's say, Ethan began, pacing around the room, that Ward Enterprises is about to enter a new market. We've never been there before. It's unfamiliar, it's competitive, and we need someone who can think fast. Who can analyze, plan, and execute in the face of uncertainty. Who can take risks and not crumble under pressure. And, we need that person today. Right now. A chill ran down Mariah's spine. This was it. The moment of truth. Ethan pointed to a young man sitting at the far end of the table. James, he said. You're up first. Show me your strategy. James straightened in his chair, visibly confident, adjusting his designer suit as if he'd been preparing for this moment his entire life. He stood and began to speak, outlining a plan that seemed flawless, too perfect, almost. He had all the buzzwords: market research, consumer data, competitive advantage. It sounded like a textbook answer. But Mariah wasn't impressed. The plan was good, but it felt safe. Predictable. Ethan listened intently, his expression unreadable. When James finished, Ethan didn't applaud. He simply nodded slowly. "Interesting," Ethan said. "But it's missing something. What happens when everything falls apart? What happens when the data fails, the market shifts, and the strategy you've carefully crafted becomes irrelevant? Where is the risk in your plan, James?" James faltered, caught off guard by the question. He stammered, trying to come up with an answer, but Ethan didn't wait. "Next," Ethan said, dismissing him with a flick of his hand. James returned to his seat, his face flushed with embarrassment. Now, the other candidates took turns presenting their strategies. Some were better than others, but none stood out in a way that made Ethan's eyes light up. Some played it safe, others tried to be bold, but none seemed to really get it. Ethan's gaze shifted around the room, scrutinizing each person as if he could see right through them. Then, as the room fell into silence again, Ethan's gaze landed on Mariah. He didn't even need to call her name. She could feel it, the weight of his attention. Her pulse quickened, but she knew this was the moment she had been waiting for. This was her shot. She couldn't back down now. Taking a deep breath, Mariah stood and walked to the front of the room. She could feel every eye on her, their judgment heavy in the air. Her muddy clothes clung to her skin, making her feel exposed and vulnerable. But she ignored it. She had to. "All right, Mariah," Ethan said, his voice as steady as ever. "What's your strategy?" She glanced down at the blank whiteboard. She could feel the sweat trickling down her back. For a moment, she couldn't think of anything to say. What could she possibly offer that would impress him? She wasn't like these other candidates. She didn't have their polished resumes, their fancy degrees, their corporate experience. But then she remembered. She remembered her life. The struggles, the grit, the determination that had gotten her this far. She wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. "I may not have all the answers," she began, her voice trembling at first but slowly gaining confidence. "But I know one thing, in a new market, it's not about playing it safe. It's about getting your hands dirty, taking risks, and being willing to fail. Failure is part of the process. And it's in those moments, when everything falls apart, that you find your strength. That's where innovation comes from." She paused, gathering her thoughts. The room was silent. Ethan's piercing eyes were on her, studying her every move. Mariah could feel the pressure building, but she pushed through it. "Instead of playing catch-up, we should disrupt the market. We should take a bold step, something no one else is doing, and make sure it resonates with the people. If we can connect with them, build trust, and offer them something they didn't even know they needed, we'll succeed. Even if we fall, we get back up and learn from it." Her words hung in the air. She could feel the tension in the room shift. The other candidates were watching her closely now, and she saw some of them exchange looks, impressed by her answer. But Ethan? He didn't show a hint of emotion. "You're right," he said slowly, still standing across the room from her. "Failure is part of the journey. But it's not just about failing. It's about how you recover. How you adapt. How you think on your feet." Mariah's heart skipped a beat. Was this it? Was she going to be dismissed like the others? But Ethan took a step forward, his eyes narrowing with intensity. "You've got potential, Mariah," he said. "But you're going to have to prove it. We're not just looking for someone who can talk a good game. We're looking for someone who can take action when everything falls apart." The room was deadly quiet. "What's your plan now?" Ethan asked, his voice low and challenging. Mariah's mind raced, but then a thought hit her. She didn't need a perfect answer. She needed to show him she could handle anything. Her voice was steady as she spoke. My plan is simple. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this work. I'll learn, adapt, and stay flexible. And I'll never back down, no matter how tough it gets. Ethan didn't say anything at first. He just stared at her, as if evaluating her soul. Mariah could feel every second stretching into eternity. Then, he finally nodded. All right, Mariah. Let's see if you can walk the talk. You're in. The word sent a jolt of disbelief through her. She couldn't believe it. She had done it. Despite the mud, despite the odds, she had earned the chance. But as she took her seat, her thoughts raced. This wasn't over. The real challenge was just beginning. Mariah sat in her chair, her heart still hammering in her chest. She had done it. She had passed the first test, the strategy challenge, and Ethan Ward, the billionaire CEO, had picked her. But even as the words, "you're in," echoed in her mind, a sense of dread began to creep in. This was just the beginning. The pressure was about to ramp up in ways she could never have imagined. The other candidates stared at her as if they couldn't believe it. Mariah's hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to keep calm. She couldn't afford to show weakness. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to let it slip through her fingers. Ethan took a few steps back from the group, folding his arms across his chest. His sharp gaze scanned the room, and the tension was palpable. I don't waste time with second chances. If you've made it through this interview, you've made it to the next phase. But here's the catch, he said, his voice now cold and calculating. You're all going to be tested, on the spot. No prep, no safe zones. What you see in front of you will determine if you're truly ready to join my team. The room felt smaller. The air seemed thicker. Mariah swallowed hard, trying to keep her focus, but the sweat began to bead on her forehead. The other candidates didn't look as calm anymore. There were murmurs, nervous glances exchanged between them. They hadn't expected this. But Mariah? She knew she had to keep it together. She had no choice but to prove herself. Ethan turned to the large digital screen at the front of the room. Behind me is a real-time crisis scenario. It's happening right now. Your job: to assess the situation, identify the problems, and propose an actionable solution. You have 5 minutes. Start now. The screen flashed to life, displaying a chaotic scene. News footage of a major technological meltdown was playing. The text on the screen read, "Ward Enterprises' new software crash, CEO demand for immediate response." Mariah's stomach dropped as she watched the footage unfold. The problem was massive. A newly launched software system had crashed, causing a multi-million-dollar disruption. The footage showed panicked employees scrambling, calls pouring in from angry clients, and angry tweets flooding social media. But it wasn't just about the software crash. The real-time situation was chaotic, and every second that passed only made it worse. The weight of the situation bore down on Mariah. This was a real crisis, not a hypothetical scenario. And now, Ethan was looking directly at her. "Go," he said coldly. Mariah felt her palms sweat. Her mind raced. She couldn't afford to freeze. She had to think fast. The clock was ticking. She quickly assessed the chaos on the screen, trying to sift through the noise. There were technical issues, PR disasters, and potentially angry investors waiting for answers. Everything needed to be fixed, and fast. But how? She took a deep breath and cleared her mind, pushing away the self-doubt creeping in. This wasn't the time to panic. She had to remember everything she had ever learned about crisis management. It wasn't about having all the answers, it was about knowing where to start. Mariah stood up, her voice calm but firm. "First, we need to identify the cause of the crash. It looks like it's something internal. We'll need the IT team to perform a root cause analysis immediately. At the same time, we need a communication strategy. We can't leave clients in the dark, transparency is key. We need to issue a statement acknowledging the issue, and give them a timeline for resolution. She glanced at Ethan, his sharp eyes watching her every move. She could tell he was evaluating her every word, every reaction. Her next move needed to be just as strong. Third, she continued, gaining confidence, we need to activate our PR team to monitor social media. Negative comments are already flooding in, and we need to control the narrative before it spirals out of control. Our investors are already nervous, so we should send them a brief update explaining the situation and our action plan. They'll appreciate knowing we're on top of it. Ethan's eyes narrowed, and he nodded slowly. Mariah could feel the pressure mounting, but she forced herself to stay steady. I agree with you, Mariah. But there's more, Ethan said, stepping closer, his tone now sharper. You need to be precise. Everything you just said is good, but it's not enough. You missed something crucial. If you want to stay in this game, you need to think about the bigger picture. You need to anticipate the fallout from all of this. This crisis will affect more than just your IT team. It will affect our relationships, our brand image, and our credibility. What's your next step? Mariah froze for a second, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't thought about the fallout. Of course, the system failure was just the beginning of the problem. But how could she have missed it? She could feel her chest tightening, and she could see Ethan's gaze piercing through her, waiting for an answer. The seconds felt like hours. Then, in a flash, it came to her. She stepped forward, her voice more confident now, though her heart was still racing. We need to take accountability for the situation. No more hiding behind technical jargon or corporate lingo. Our clients, our investors, they deserve to know we are accountable for this. We can offer compensation to the affected clients, and provide them with direct lines of communication to our customer service team. For investors, we need to set up an emergency meeting to reassure them and show them the exact steps we're taking to prevent this from happening again. There was a brief pause. Mariah held her breath, watching Ethan carefully, waiting for his verdict. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and calculating. Good. You're showing promise, Mariah. But the real test comes in how you follow through. You've given a good theoretical response, but now I want to see your action. Tomorrow, you'll be on the ground with the team, dealing with this crisis firsthand. You'll be reporting directly to me. Mariah blinked, feeling the weight of his words. The real test. Wasn't the crisis itself already the test? But she couldn't back down now. She had to prove herself, and this was her chance. Ethan gave her a sharp look. This is your one shot, Mariah. If you can handle this, you'll have earned your place. If not. He let the words trail off, letting the unspoken threat hang in the air. The room was silent. Everyone was watching her, waiting for her next move. Mariah's heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't a game anymore. This was real. And the stakes were higher than ever. She took a deep breath and nodded. I won't let you down. Ethan didn't respond right away. Instead, he turned and motioned for everyone to leave the room. Tomorrow. Be ready, he said, before walking out. As Mariah stepped into the hallway, the weight of what she had just agreed to started to hit her. She had no choice but to rise to the occasion. She couldn't afford to fail now. Not after coming this far. But the real question lingered in her mind, could she truly handle the pressure of what was coming next? The next day would decide everything. The next day arrived faster than Mariah could have ever imagined. The moment she woke up, she could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her. She had barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts of the crisis, the responsibilities ahead, and the real test that Ethan Ward had set before her. She quickly grabbed a cup of coffee, hoping to steady her nerves, but even the warm caffeine couldn't calm the storm inside her. Today, she would be thrown into the chaos, head first. There would be no time to second-guess herself. No room for mistakes. She dressed quickly in the professional attire she'd managed to afford, still covered in the remnants of yesterday's mud. Her outfit was nothing compared to the designer suits that the other employees wore, but she couldn't focus on that now. She had a job to do, and nothing was going to stop her. Arriving at Ward Enterprises, she was immediately hit by the frenzy of activity. Employees were rushing down the hallways, their faces filled with anxiety and stress. The air was thick with tension. Mariah's stomach churned. This was the real deal. No more practice scenarios. The chaos from yesterday was no longer on a screen, it was here, in the heart of the company. Mariah made her way to the war room, a sleek glass-walled conference room where the crisis team was already gathered. The buzz of conversation died down as soon as she entered, and she could feel the eyes of the room on her. The team had clearly been working around the clock to contain the situation. There were charts on the walls, laptops open with email chains and social media threads scrolling by in real time. Ethan Ward was already at the head of the table, his eyes steely and focused. His sharp gaze landed on her as she entered, and despite the chaos around him, he remained composed, like he always did. "You're late," he said, his voice low but powerful. "I'm sorry, sir," Mariah responded, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm ready to go." Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he motioned to an empty seat next to him. Mariah took it quickly, her palms sweating against the sleek surface of the conference table. The room was silent except for the clicking of keyboards and the occasional murmurs between team members. But even though there was so much happening, it felt like Mariah was standing still in the eye of the storm. "Let's get started," Ethan said, breaking the silence. His voice was cold, cutting through the tension. "You all know what's at stake. Our software failure has cost us millions already. Clients are furious, our investors are calling for answers, and the media is out for blood. This isn't just a technical issue anymore, this is about the future of this company." Mariah's stomach turned. Millions? The scale of what she was about to face hit her like a slap to the face. She had to handle this. She had to do it right. Ethan's eyes scanned the room again, lingering on each member of the team. "I need action. Not more talk. No more excuses. We need to fix this now." He turned his gaze to Mariah, and for a split second, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something that could have been respect, or maybe even doubt. She couldn't be sure. "Mariah," he said, his voice clipped, "you've been assigned to work with the PR team. We need to control the narrative on social media, and you're the one who will make that happen." She nodded, swallowing hard. She had no experience with PR, no formal training in handling public relations crises. But she had learned something valuable yesterday: this job wasn't about perfection. It was about action. "I'll do my best, sir," she said. Ethan looked at her for a long moment before he spoke again. "I don't need your best. I need results, Mariah. There's no room for error." Mariah felt a sharp pang in her chest. She wasn't sure how much more pressure she could handle, but she couldn't back down now. She had come this far. She had to show him she was capable. Ethan turned his attention to the rest of the room. "The rest of you," he said, "focus on technical repairs. We need our software working within the next few hours. If we fail, the company will collapse. Let's move." The team quickly dispersed, and Mariah followed the PR team lead, a seasoned woman named Linda, into a separate room where they could work on crafting a response for the media. "Here's what we're up against," Linda said, pulling up a live feed of the company's social media accounts on her laptop. "The backlash is huge. People are already calling the company a fraud and untrustworthy. Our clients are demanding answers. The media is asking if Ward Enterprises will even survive." Linda clicked through several threads, showing Mariah how angry the public was. People were furious that they had invested their money into a company that couldn't even deliver a functional product. Some were threatening to pull their investments, while others were threatening lawsuits. Mariah's heart sank. It was worse than she had imagined. "We need to act fast," Linda said, her tone sharp. "Our first move is to release a statement. We need to take accountability without sounding desperate. We're going to offer a partial refund to our top-tier clients, and we'll offer a full report of what went wrong within the next 24 hours. That's the best we can do." Mariah nodded, trying to absorb everything. This was more than she had ever signed up for. The stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. She wasn't just dealing with clients, she was dealing with an entire company's reputation. As Linda began typing the statement, Mariah glanced at the clock. Time was running out. She had to come up with something more. Something that could shift the conversation away from the company's failure and back to its future. She took a deep breath, pushing past the anxiety crawling up her throat. "Linda," she said, "what if we do something different? What if we turn this crisis into an opportunity? We can position ourselves as transparent and accountable leaders in the industry, even if it means showing our vulnerabilities." Linda gave her a sideways glance. "That's risky. People want solutions. They don't care about transparency, they want results." "But transparency is the solution," Mariah argued, her voice gaining strength. "What if we show them that we've learned from this? That we're stronger now because of it? That we're taking steps to make sure this never happens again? It could shift the narrative." Linda was silent for a moment, her fingers pausing over the keyboard. Mariah could see the hesitation in her eyes, but there was something else too, something like curiosity. "You're thinking outside the box," Linda said finally. "Maybe it could work." Mariah smiled, feeling a small surge of hope. Maybe she was on the right track. But she wasn't done yet. She had to make this work. She had to prove that she belonged here. As the minutes ticked away, the pressure mounted. The walls of the room seemed to close in on her. But she kept her focus. She wasn't going to let Ethan down. She wasn't going to let herself down. Then, as she hit send on the final draft of their media statement, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Mariah opened it quickly. "The investors are calling for an immediate board meeting. Be prepared. Ethan is furious." Her stomach dropped. Ethan's fury was the last thing she wanted to face right now. But she didn't have a choice. This was the moment she had to prove herself. The real test had just begun. Mariah's hands shook as she stared at the message on her phone. "Ethan is furious," the words hit her like a thunderclap. She had done everything she could, but now she was being called into the lion's den. The investors, the board, everyone was expecting results, and Mariah wasn't sure if her efforts had been enough to keep the company from falling apart. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Ethan. Boardroom. Now. She swallowed hard. She knew what that meant. Ethan was going to lay it all on the line. If she hadn't delivered, there would be no second chances. She stood up from the PR team's small conference room, forcing her legs to move even though they felt like lead. She could feel the weight of the day pushing down on her, but she had no choice but to keep moving forward. She had to show Ethan she wasn't going to crumble. She couldn't. The elevator ride up to the boardroom was agonizing. The hum of the elevator felt too loud in the silence. Every minute that passed made her think of everything that could go wrong. The investors had been texting her non-stop, demanding a resolution. And even though she had put everything into that media statement, into shifting the narrative, there was no way to know if it had been enough. When the elevator doors opened, Mariah stepped out, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. The boardroom was big, sterile, and intimidating, with a long, glossy table stretching from one end to the other. The top executives of Ward Enterprises were already seated, each one staring intently at her as she walked in. Ethan stood at the front, his sharp gaze never leaving her. "Mariah," he said, his voice colder than usual. You know why we're here. The room fell silent as he gestured for her to sit at the far end of the table. She could feel their eyes on her, the tension thick in the air. The investors were impatient. The board members were uneasy. And Ethan? He was unreadable, his face a mask of stoic professionalism. I'm not here to waste time, Ethan continued. We've been hit hard. Our stock price is tanking, clients are furious, and we are losing credibility by the second. The media is out of control. I want to know why your plan didn't fix this. Mariah felt a lump form in her throat. She had worked tirelessly, staying up late with Linda and the PR team, crafting the perfect response, trying to control the chaos. But was it enough? She cleared her throat and stood up. Mr. Ward, I took full responsibility for the PR crisis. I believe that by being transparent, showing accountability, and offering compensation to our clients, we could regain their trust. Ethan raised an eyebrow. But did it work? Is the crisis averted? Have you stopped the bleeding? Mariah paused for a moment, trying to steady her nerves. She looked around the room. The board members were impatient. The investors were already whispering to one another, their faces tight with frustration. The pressure to deliver was crushing. We've managed to slow the damage, Mariah said, her voice gaining strength. The media has started to shift their tone. Some of our larger clients have agreed to work with us again, and we've seen a reduction in angry calls. But I'll be honest, we're not out of the woods yet. The full repairs on the software will take time. We're in the process of gathering data to prevent further incidents, but this will take weeks, not days. Ethan stared at her, his expression still cold. He didn't say anything, but the silence was deafening. Mariah's heart raced as she braced herself for the blow. She had given everything she had, but it still didn't feel like enough. The stakes had never been higher, and the weight of the company's future was too much to bear. I need results, Mariah, Ethan said, his voice low but powerful. Not excuses. Not half solutions. If this company collapses, it's on you. Her chest tightened, but she refused to show any weakness. This was her moment. She couldn't back down now. I understand, sir, she said, her voice steady. But I believe the steps we've taken so far are the right ones. We're doing everything we can to fix the problem. We're not running from it. The room was still. Then, without warning, one of the investors, a sharp-looking man in his mid-50s named Charles Whitten, leaned forward and spoke. We've heard all this before, Mariah, Charles said, his voice sharp with skepticism. We've been in meetings where companies promised transparency, promised accountability. And in the end, it was just talk. No action. Do you think we're stupid? Mariah's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the heat of the board members' eyes on her. They weren't just questioning her, they were doubting her every word. Ethan's gaze remained fixed on her, as though he was waiting for her to fold, waiting for her to give him a reason to throw her out of the room. But Mariah refused to break. She stepped forward and looked Charles in the eye. I understand your frustration, Mr. Whitten. I do. But the truth is, you're right. Transparency alone won't fix this. But we have the power to change the narrative and rebuild what was broken. If you let me prove it, I'll show you that the actions we're taking will lead us to recovery. For a moment, there was silence. Charles exchanged a glance with the other board members, and Mariah could feel the tension in the room begin to shift. Ethan stood still, his hands resting on the table. All right, Mariah, he said, his voice measured but not without a hint of admiration. I'll give you a chance. But this is your last one. If we don't see immediate improvement, I will have no choice but to take action. Mariah nodded, holding his gaze. She wasn't sure if she had just saved herself or if this was the calm before the storm, but she knew one thing, she wasn't going to back down. As she turned to leave the room, her legs shaking, a feeling of determination washed over her. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The pressure was intense, and the stakes were high, but this was her shot. She couldn't afford to fail now. Ethan's final words echoed in her mind as she stepped into the hallway. "You've got one shot, Mariah. Make it count." She took a deep breath and headed back to the front lines. The real test was about to begin. If you like this story, comment, share and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.